Have you ever felt spooked, excited, or relaxed from the music in video games? Video game music contributes massively to the overall gameplay experience, sometimes even manipulating our emotions to allow us to feel engrossed in our virtual worlds and make us feel like we've almost been transported into the game itself. In today's Mutalk, we will be uncovering the history behind video game music and the impact it has on us today. In the 1970s, video games began to gain popularity. When they were first invented, video games didn't even have any sound. The first game that included sound effects was Pong in 1972. These games mostly used a specific computer chip that would convert code into sound waves in order to generate sound effects, and later on, music. One of the first examples of music being used in video games is the 1975 game Gunfight, as we can see on the screen. The first game to actually use a continuous background soundtrack, however, was Tomohiro Nishikado's Space Invaders, released by Taito in 1978. Just featuring 4 descending notes playing in a loop, Space Invaders' soundtrack is simple yet effective, as the speed of the music increases as the enemies descend upon the player, creating a sense of urgency. Video game music still serves the same purpose today, creating the atmosphere for the players. Unfortunately, the sounds that could be generated with the available technology were limited. Most systems were capable of generating only 2 tones or notes at a time. These early systems only had sound processors that could process 8 bits, a form of code used in computer science, which gave the early video game music from these games the term 8-bit music. Many video games still use this style of music today, creating a sense of nostalgia. Technology continued to advance in the 80s. Namco's Rally X was the first video game to include continuous background music with a melody. In 1980, Sunsoft's Stratovox was also released, the first known video game to feature speech synthesis, where spoken language was generated by written input into a machine. Konami's 1981 arcade game Frogger took a different approach to video game music, using at least 11 different gameplay tracks, including level starting and game over themes. In the mid to late 80s, more composers who actually had experience in music started to compose for video games, rather than having the game developers do that job. The rising popularity of video game music in Japan inspired American companies to pay more serious attention to the music in video games by 1988. From the late 1980s to 1990s, advancing technology meant that composers had more and more tools at their disposal, and with the newly invented PCs starting to develop better audio quality, video games could be played on them as well. Fast forwarding to today, with less and less technological limitations, video game music incorporates many different genres of music. From the nostalgic chiptune soundtrack of Undertale to the haunting orchestral music in The Last of Us, video game music has evolved into an incredibly diverse genre of music. Now, in the 21st century, video game music has ballooned into a thriving industry, with many hit themes such as Undertale's Megalovania and Minecraft Sweden, gaining tens of millions of views on YouTube. And video game music is evolving into even more complex forms, with basic, monophonic, loop tracks forming the framework of an industry now worth over $173 billion. Video game music is becoming more and more advanced due to improvements in musical and digital technology. It now serves many different purposes: to set the pacing and the atmosphere of a game, intensify cutscenes and build up stakes, warn players of incoming danger, or even trigger certain emotions in players. The 1978 game, Space Invaders, is a prime example of this, being the first to implement a branch of music known as hurry music, which is still used today. Hurry music is the intensifying or speeding up of a soundtrack in order to create pressure on users. In this case, this type of music is used when enemies get closer, in order to invoke a sense of urgency and build up pressure in players. But just how effective is this method? Research has shown that players' hearts beat faster as the music from Space Invaders speeds up. However, when the music was removed, players were far less panicked when enemies got closer. Composers clearly haven't forgotten the importance of a great soundtrack to help create atmosphere, pressure, and emotion. Along with hurry music, many new music mediums have been created to form the most engaging experience possible for players, such as adaptive music, the changing of music to fit its atmosphere, orchestral music, and more recently, leitmotifs. A leitmotif is a recurring theme that pops up more than once in a game. A leitmotif is usually associated with a certain character or area in the game, in order to allow players to associate certain elements of music with these characteristics. Leitmotifs have been used in many popular games, such as The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, with shrine music being similar to the past theme of the Temple of Time. This allows listeners to associate with the shrine, as well as build continuity and a sense of familiarity within the user fanbase. However, though most video games choose to replace their old soundtracks from preceding games, a subgenre of video game music chooses to use their old soundtracks in order to capitalize on nostalgia. The Tetris Type A theme, created in 1989 by Hirokazu Tanaku, uses sound repetitions to create an almost hypnotic effect, as well as speeding up to create pressure. The same Tetris theme track is still used today, replicating the almost irreplaceable sense of urgency veteran players felt when pressured into a tight corner. 8-bit music also invokes nostalgia, as that style of music was the only type available for video games in the 1980s. Nowadays, the popularity of video game music continues to grow. To give you an idea of just how popular it has become, even when considered separately from their games, in May 2004, a single performance of the Final Fantasy soundtrack was held. The show sold out in 3 days, and there was almost a riot at the box office when people couldn't get tickets. We have reached a point where video game music is so popular that concerts of video game soundtracks can outsell concerts for so-called traditional music. Video game music plays such a large role in modern-day entertainment, without us even realizing it. Next time you want to play a quick round of Tetris or build a cottage in Minecraft, try listening closely to the music in the background. Thank you for watching!